Welcome to the E-Academy. In this episode, we will take a closer look at the MXD-300 wireless multipurpose detector. It is a device which operates in the 433 MHz frequency band and belongs to the family of the MICRA wireless system products. This means that the detector can work with the Perfector WRL control panels, MTX-300 and Versa MCU controllers, as well as the MICRA alarm module. The MXD-300 detector is described as multi-purpose and can be used as magnetic contact with roller shutter input, shock detector, and magnetic contact or water flood detector. Before I proceed to discussing the individual operating modes, I will first show you the essential elements located on the detector electronics board. Here you can see 3 terminals marked as MF, COM and R. They can be used in selected operating modes, e.g. to connect an additional NC-wide detector, a flood probe, or a roller shutter detector. Here, 3 groups of pins for detector configuration are located. The first pair is used to define which device is to be handled by the MF input. When there is no jumper on the pins, this input will handle a NC-type detector, e.g. a wide magnetic contact. And when the jumper is placed over the pins, the MF input is ready to work with the flood probe. Let's take a look to the right. The first of the 3 pairs of pins, designated as E-Save mode, controls the detector operating mode, normal or energy saving. When the jumper is removed, the detector will work in normal mode, that is, any alarm will result in a radio transmission. When the jumper is placed over the pins, energy save mode is enabled. In this case, information on alarms is sent no more than once every 3 minutes. The exception are tamper alarms. Information on tamper is sent each time. The pins in the middle are used for selecting sensitivity of the roller shutter input. According to the information printed next to the pins, 2 sensitivities are available. If there is no jumper, the detector will react after detecting 8 pulses within 120 seconds. And when the jumper is placed over the pins, the alarm will be reported as soon as 3 pulses are registered within 30 seconds. The third pair of pins is used to disable the shock sensor. When the jumper is removed, the shock sensor will be active. When the jumper is on, the sensor is disabled. It is worth noting here that the potentiometer, which is located next to the pins, is used to adjust the sensitivity of the shock sensor. Now let's go to the 4 pins designated as O, T, S. They are used to configure the reed switches. If the pins next to the O marked are shorted, both reed switches are disabled. If the jumper is placed across the 2 middle pins, those next to the letter T, the reed switch located at the top edge of the detector will be enabled. T stands for top. And shortening the pins at the S mark, which stands for side, will turn on the side reed switch. In the middle of the electronics board, between the elements already discussed, there is a tamper contact, which responds to opening the enclosure or detaching the detector from the mount. OK, you already know that you can select one of the 5 functionalities for the detector. Now I will show you how to select each of them and how they work. That is, which events will be reported as an alarm. I will take advantage of that the detector works in the test mode for 20 minutes after inserting the batteries, in which the LED is on to indicate violations. So one thing at a time. The MXD-300 detector, configured in this way, will work as a magnetic contact. There is no jumper on the F pins, so the MF input handles the NC-type detector. Have connected the K1 magnetic contact to this input. If no additional detector is needed, this input should be shorted to ground. The detector is not to handle the roller shutter input, so the R input is connected to common ground. The jumper placed across the T pins means that the reed switch located in the upper part of the detector is enabled. If the jumper were placed across the S pins, the reed switch located on the detector side would be enabled. For the shock sensor to be disabled, the shock off pins must be shorted. Let's insert the battery and check how the detector works. In the case of magnetic contact, the alarm occurs after the magnet is moved away from the detector or after the NC input is opened. For example, On violation of the connected wired detector. OK, the red LED indicates violations as it should. Let's go to the next type, that is a magnetic contact with roller shutter input. Meanwhile, I have removed the battery and changed the settings. Let's take a look at the current configuration. There is no jumper on the F pins, so the MF input handles the NC type detector. However, this time, instead of connecting such a detector, I have shorted this input to ground. I have connected a roller shutter detector to the R input and placed the jumper here to set the sensitivity to 3 pulses in 30 seconds. For a change, this time I have chosen the side reed switch by shorting the pins marked as S. And finally, I have placed the jumper over the shock off pins to turn off the shock sensor. OK, I insert the battery. Move the magnet away from the detector enclosure. The LED indicates violation. This time, I do not have the NC detector connected, so I go straight to the roller shutter detector. I pull the line slowly. OK, the alarm is triggered after the first 3 pulses from the roller shutter detector. Now we can deal with another type of detector, i.e. the shock detector. There is still no jumper on the F pins. The MF and R inputs are shorted to ground. For the reed switches to be disabled, the jumper must be on the pins marked with the letter O. And what is most important in this mode, the shock sensor must be turned on. So there is no jumper on the shock off pins. I insert the battery. Check if the detector responds to moving the magnet toward or away from it. OK, no reaction. To shake the surface on which the detector is placed, I will hit the table. The impact was not too strong, so the detector did not respond. So I increased the sensitivity of the shock sensor by turning the potentiometer to the right. OK, the detector responds. When configuring the shock detector, remember to select sensitivity level so as to detect shocks caused, for example, by hitting the door frame, next to which the device is installed. The sensitivity should not be too high so that the detector does not report false alarms, for example, when someone knocks on the door. The next type is the shock detector and magnetic contact. It is configured similarly as in the previous case, which means no jumper on the F pins. MF and R inputs are shorted to ground. Note here, if necessary, you can connect the NC detector to the MF input. Opening this input, i.e. violating such a detector, will also trigger an alarm. Placing a jumper over the T or S pins will turn on the selected reed switch. And since the shock sensor is to be turned on, there is no jumper on the shock off pins. I insert the battery. Hit the table. And you can see the LED confirms detection of the shock caused by impact. Moving the magnet away from the detector also triggers the alarm. So we can go to the last mode, which is the water flood detector. Let's take a look at the last configuration. For the MF input to be ready to work with the flood probe, there must be a jumper placed over the F pins. The FPX1 probe, the key component of the flood detector, is connected to the MF input, while the R input is shorted to ground. The reed switches are turned off, so the jumper is placed over the pins marked O. The same applies to the shock sensor, which is to be disabled, so the jumper is placed over the shock off pins. Well, so far so good. To check the operation of the flood detector, immerse the probe tips in water. As you can see, the detector responds almost instantly to the simulated flooding. It should be noted here that the detector will only report the end of flooding a few seconds after the water level drops below the height at which the probe contacts are located. Finally, it is worth mentioning that the MXD-300 detector, regardless of its active mode, is always recognized as MMD-302 in the wireless system it is working in. Therefore, it is important to give it a unique name, clearly indicating which events will trigger an alarm in its case. Of course, you can add MXD-300 to the Perfector WRL control panels, MTX-300 and Versa MCU controllers, or MICRA module just like other wireless detectors. There are no differences here. Okay, that's it for this episode. Thank you. Please join us at the next eAcademy meetings. See you soon.